The environment is contingent on standards. Right? The environment is contingent on standards. My eye's itching, sorry. So imagine, imagine the following, right? I want to talk about reproducibility in the scientific. So I'll show you an exact correlation, right? And we'll go like this, just because I want to make it explicitly clear what I'm doing. And we all know science, right? So we have hypothetical, well, I'm jumping the gun. But anyway, we have a conditional claim, if then. Science, the consequence is reproducibility. Right? Scientists need to be able to reproduce their findings. If I arrive at X in my lab, you need to arrive at X in your lab, which assumes that you have a lab, the environment, right? The scientific lab. And in the lab, you have the same beakers and whatever, blah, 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 gauges, wires, electrodes, blah, whatever, scientific checker, instruments, whatever. You have the proper instrumentation, right? I have particular instrumentation, and you have particular instrumentation. That instrumentation is localized within a geographic area in a building, and we both have similar sort of instrumentation, and you can use my recipe in order to arrive at the same conclusion that I had, right? But that recipe requires a shared sense in which we talk about standards, right? So in the scientific community, the standards for science are formulas and numbers, right? Right? So within science, scientists use formulas and numbers. The gravitational constant, I don't remember, I think it's mass equals distance over velocity or something like that, whatever it was. It was like old, I haven't done physics in like forever. But I know there's a relationship between mass, velocity, and distance. I forget the formula. So someone tell me in the comments just for kicks what the formula is, right? But yeah, so if I want to make an assessment of distance, velocity, there's a formula. It's not a US formula. It's not a Chinese formula. It's not a Japanese formula. It's a formula for the world, right? It applies to no matter where you go in the world, to my understanding. That formula applies universally throughout the world, right? So within the globe, that formula uses numbers, and it structures those numbers in a particular formula, and we can use that standardized process within our labs to reproduce our findings. Now, the reason why I'm beating this horse to a death, and I apologize if it seems so freaking obvious, right? But I want to make sure that it's absolutely clear, is that that's exactly what's being attempted here, right? Scientists recognized this in the 16th century, and the intelligence community is recognizing this in the 21st century. So we're a little bit behind, but we're going to play catch up relatively quickly, right? We need to create the standards. We recognize that the environment is easy. We've sort of already satisfied that condition. And insofar as we have the standards, then we'll be able to share this intelligence, reproducibility. We'll be able to share this intelligence, and I'll talk more specifically about it. So this is how I would say that this works, right? So that's the importance, right? We want to be able to share intelligence quickly, effectively, immediately, accurately, and we want to make sure that the system that we have in place for the sharing of intelligence is obviously used for the benefit of protecting the population. Right? That's the whole point. All right, role of standards. Not going to go into this too much. Standards have an important role for ensuring consistency of business processes. Right? The formula, right? The formula for, let me think of, do I know any formulas off? Y equals mx plus b. That's all I remember. It's like that one I know for a fact, right? In slope assessment, this was like 7th grade or 6th grade. It's like y equals mx plus b. I think that's right, right? That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. So that creates a standard in which we can assess slope, if I'm correct. And if I mess that up, I apologize. But you understand formulas, right? So standards have an important role in ensuring consistency, right? Yeah, formulas ensure that we consistently apply the same formulas, we just substitute and change out the numbers. Information flows, information exchange, infrastructure development, and they are key decision-making factors, right? I can't decide, for example, and I'm sure there's a formula for this, if I, the curves that you go, I don't know the types of engineers that build bridges and roads and stuff, mechanical maybe or whoever. So, like for me to go home, I have to jump on the freeway and make a big turn, and it's on either side. It's like dirt on either side or grass on either side, and engineers know that curve will only support a maximum speed of, let's say, 75 miles an hour. Because if you're going at 75 miles an hour, and no matter how small your car is, if you're going any faster, you're going to just, instead of going like this, you're going to go whoop, right off, right? So of course they set the curve to like a ridiculously low amount, right? What we end up recognizing is, and they are key decision-making factors when considering the future information, right? It's important to recognize in the building of roads, as a very obvious example, that in deciding what to post as the top mile per hour that you can address on this curve, and this is a very bootleg example, but I hope it's so ridiculously obvious that it's almost boring, then I'm doing my job right. If you post, if the actual threshold limit is 75 miles per hour, meaning that at 75 miles per hour you can safely go around the corner, but at 76 miles per hour you will fall off the corner, then in deciding what number to post, you don't post 75 miles per hour. Because it's the uppermost threshold. 1 mile per hour higher and the person is killed. So no, that's not going to protect the population, right? That's not going to protect the population. Because there is no degree of flexibility in posting 75 miles per hour if that is actually the maximum speed at which you can approach this curve. So what do? You put fastest speed, I don't know, 45 miles per hour. Right? And I think usually that's what they have posted, right? 40 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. Knowing full and well that it can sustain 75 miles an hour, but if somebody goes 75 miles an hour, you're saying you were going 35 miles over the speed limit. Like, that's on you. That's not on us. So, how does that relate to, I think that's clear, but how does that relate to intelligence sharing? With respect to intelligence sharing, if we have standards in place, and we recognize that those standards are there to protect the population, right, then what we need to make sure is that once the information is disseminated all the way down to the point that it reaches the population, right, now we can let the population know, X. Well, as far as X is concerned, the population need only know the relationship between X and their livelihood, right? They don't need to know that, X is being planned now. So you make a generic statement, it's the holidays, be careful on your flights, right? You're going to almost hear that every Christmas season, right? Or every, whatever. Usually around like December, you always hear that, right? It's like, just be careful, we got a terrorist threat warning, blah, 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 right? The population doesn't know that the terrorist threat warning is specifically been targeted at this particular location by this particular group, and these many people are going to be there, and because it's going to be complete panic, right? The population is going to panic forever. And when the population panics forever, right, panic is sort of like going off of the side of the bridge, is that the country becomes immobilized. There's always going to be threats, not just to the United States, there's going to be threats to every sovereign nation, from outside influence and from inside influence. But the population doesn't, this is my approach, and I might be biased in this, but my personal assessment is that the population doesn't need to know the nitty-gritty. They shouldn't know the nitty-gritty of what's going on because they're going to panic and it's going to be insane. What they need to know is how to conduct themselves safely, how to be aware, and leave the rest to us. That's my approach, right? So those standards are essential because in communicating this information now, if you recognize that there is a threat, and we'll talk about this, if you recognize that there's a threat, and that threat has been verified in a different sense by another organization, then you can start to see redundancies in. Oh, it's the same group. Oh, yeah, over in my assessment, when I was doing my human intel, I heard the same name pop up. Oh, wow, the same name popped up in 2 databases. Let's check to see, or well, I'll talk about that in a second. Let's check to see if we can sort of pinpoint this information, right? So it's a lot of cross-referencing. And the architecture for this framework is a bit complex, but I think you get the idea. So that's that. All right. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the CTISS, and it's the Common Terrorism Information Sharing Standards.